IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It is Wednesday, it's hump day. It is time to talk some Notre Dame football. Going to talk today about a couple different topics, and it's their lack of activity for Notre Dame over the last couple days, which I think caught a lot of us off guard. And that is the fact that Notre Dame didn't have anybody jump in the portal, and which was a little bit of a surprise to a lot of folks, including myself. And we'll talk about that. We're going to start the day with some talk about the Notre Dame defense and just sort of our state of the union of the Notre Dame defense. As I discussed yesterday, the offense-defense conversation will kind of kick off what is going to be a couple-week-long just overview of the Notre Dame football team, where things stand right now, what we learned about this team during the spring, what questions still remain, not just with the team upcoming, but then also a little bit of a glimpse into the future when we get into those position breakdowns. The offense-defense is going to be more of a right now, where the positional things will take more of a look of right now, but then also looking beyond the 2024 season, because at some positions the look beyond is really exciting, and in other positions you're like, there's a little bit more questions. And so we'll dive into that in future shows. And then, of course, at the end of the show today, we're going to have a buy, sell, hold. Going to have fun with that. There's some really good questions, some interesting questions today that I'm looking, not questions, but more propositions that I'm going to get into when we get into the buy, sell, hold. So very much looking forward to that. I hope you all are ready to go. Hope you guys are fired up, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be really fun because this portal conversation is really interesting, because the portal has been for Notre Dame something that I didn't really think that it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a positive for Notre Dame. It's been even more of a positive than I thought for Notre Dame, but also shows that there's some challenges for Notre Dame when it comes to the portal. So we'll dive into that as well. They're good challenges. I think they're good challenges. So I'm going to enjoy very much having that conversation. So we'll dive into that at the end of or during the portal section. But I hope you guys are ready. Going to be fun. No mailbag today. If you do have some questions that you want me to get answered today, you go ahead and throw those super chats in. The buy, sell, hold at the end of the show will be questions or propositions that were posed on the premium message board. That is who is going to be determining the questions for the buy, sell, holds. If you want to get one of your own in there, go ahead and throw a super chat, but we're going to lock and load and get ready to go as we're going to have some fun today, guys. I hope you all are ready to go, but I'm really looking forward to talking about this. Thinking about the Notre Dame defense gets me fired up. So let's get ready to rock and roll with today's show. Talking about the Notre Dame football team. Part one of today's show, we're going to talk about the state of the program, state of the union for the Notre Dame defense, and where things are right now. And where things are, they're in a pretty good place if we're going to talk big picture. Notre Dame is coming off of a season in which they finished in the top 10 nationally in scoring defense, total defense, yards per play allowed, passing defense, passer rating, completion percentage allowed, yards allowed per pass attempt. They tied with Michigan for most or fewest touchdown passes allowed. They had double interceptions, and then they had touchdowns allowed. They were top 5 also in red zone defense. They were a team that was very, very good last year on defense. They weren't perfect, and nobody is. And there were some moments where you'd like to see them buckle down a little bit early against Clemson, and maybe finish a little better against Ohio State in the last drive and Louisville in the fourth quarter. But overall, this was an outstanding defense last season. And there were some losses that you have to overcome. Obviously, you lost J.D. Bertrand and Maris Leofau to the NFL draft. I don't know about you guys. I haven't had a chance to really wrap up the draft. I was very surprised that Maris went in the third round, but fired up for him. I was concerned. I said in last week's show, I had a bad feeling that J.D. was going to go undrafted because of not being able to work out. So to see him go in round 5 was awesome. I was very happy to see that. You've got to replace those two guys, not just their play and their production, but you also got to replace their leadership and experience. We saw Javonte Jean-Baptiste get picked in the 7th round. You also have to replace DJ Brown, Nano Safa-Mensah, guys that are out of the program, and then Thomas Harper signed pretty quickly after the draft with the Los Angeles Chargers. So there are certainly some key pieces that Notre Dame is going to have to replace, and that includes Chris O'Leary, who is now the safeties coach with the Chargers. But there's also a lot of talent coming back, and for the most part, the staff returns intact. And so the expectations for the Notre Dame defense are still very high, and there's nothing that we've seen from what they lost this offseason that was abnormal. There was nothing we've seen from this team this spring to say, hey, this defense is going to take a big step back next season. I don't think I don't think we see that. And but there are also some things where, hey, if this doesn't get better, then they'll be more like they were last year, not a team that takes another step. And so we'll dive into that. There's a very interesting comment made by Andrew Gilmore in the chat, which I will actually, that is on my to address list, Andrew, when we get into the show. So that's a good comment, and we'll dive into that. You and I don't agree on that, but I understand where you're coming from, and I'm going to make the case why I don't agree with that when we get into that portion of the show. But it's a good place to be in. So when you look at the defense, is the question is, okay, are you going to keep rolling with where you are, where you've been, which this past season you were pretty good. 2022, solid defense, top 20 to 25 defense. 2023, top 10 defense. 2021, top 15 to 20. 2020, top 15-ish. 2020 or 2019, top 15 to 20. 2018, top 10. 2017, top 20-ish. 2016, we're going to pretend that didn't happen. 2020, 12, you go back to 2012 during that stretch with Bob Diaco, his first 3 years at Notre Dame were very good defensively. So having good defense at Notre Dame is not new. What we saw last year, however, was the defense go to an even greater height and greater level of dominance. And the question is, can you continue that? Or is it going to be a falling back a little bit to what it was before, which was good, but not elite? And I think last year's defense was borderline elite, if not elite. It wasn't generational like the Georgia 2021 defense or Clemson in 2018 and some of the Alabama defenses in the teens as well, but it was very good. And when you look at the type of teams that they played, I think that adds value. The 2012 team is the last time Notre Dame gave up fewer points than what they allowed last year at 15.9 points per game. But this past year's defense gave up 29 fewer yards per game and over 0.3 fewer yards per play. I think it was an even better defense, in my opinion, when it was on. When it was on, it was better than the 2012 defense. I think the 2012 defense, what set that defense, made that defense so good was up until the title game, they were just so good every week. The best of 2023 to me was the better than 2012, but the worst of 2023 was worse than the worst of 2012 when you look at the regular season. And so to me, that is an exceptional growth or development. We saw the defense get a lot better in areas where it struggled the year before. Now, I made a comment last offseason, and I'm sure a lot of you remember this, where I said if they just got better in the red zone, that takes off a lot of points off of their points per game. And that's exactly what they did. They went from second worst to second best red zone defense in the country last year, which is obviously a big part of it. So, when you look at just where this team is, they raise the bar for defense. And so the question is, will they get better? Will they stay the same? Or will they fall back a little bit? And all three are possibilities. I mean, they are. Sitting here May 1st, then they're all three possibilities. I don't think they're equal possibilities, but they're all three possibilities. If I was a betting man, I would say I'd set the odds higher that they kind of stay in that same range, that they don't get better, they don't get worse. They just continue being a legitimate top 10 caliber defense, top 5 in some areas, top 5, 15-ish in other areas, and which puts them in that top 10. I would say I'd lean slightly towards getting better over taking a step back, just because of the talent level. But to get to that point, there's a lot of questions that have to get answered and some things we need to see happen that we either haven't seen or haven't seen from the players that are currently on the roster. And so that's the thing that gets you excited. But as David Lowe said in the chat, Notre Dame had a championship caliber defense last year. And the question is, can they maintain that this year, or can they get even better? And better means not that you had a championship caliber defense, but you had a defense that was so good it could overcome your weeks where your offense stunk. Georgia had defenses in the past. Clemson's had defenses in the past. Alabama's had defenses in the past where no matter what the offense did against Ohio State, they would have made those plays on the last drive. Notre Dame had 3 big opportunities to stop Ohio State on that last drive. You had the 4th and 7 that you allowed them convert. You had the dropped interception by DJ Brown, and you had the bad play by Ramon Henderson on the seam route that would have basically ended that game if he would have played it better. Great elite defenses, championship, like winning defenses, not caliber, but winning defenses make those plays. the elite best of the best defenses, as bad as the offense was against Louisville, they shut Louisville down and still have a shot to win that game at the end. Same thing with Clemson. They'd have played better than they did against Clemson. So the defense was outstanding last season, but there certainly is room for it to be even better. This is not at all to blame the defense for those losses last year. It's the offense was the problem, but the defense can get to the point where it is so good that it doesn't matter. Bama had defenses like that. Clemson's had defenses like that. Georgia had a defense like that in 2021. And so that's where this defense hopes to get to. They're not there yet, but that's where they need to get to, is that sort of level of, in those moments against the best teams, you make those stops more often than not. And so you can look at it, and that's a good thing. So I think some of you are taking this as some sort of insult to the defense last year. It's not at all. It was an outstanding defense last year, but you also have to look at it and say, can it get better? And the answer is yes, it can. It can get better, and it needs to get better if it's going to be that sort of championship caliber defense that not only you can win with that defense, but you win because of that defense. And that's what it has to get to. So that's the standard that I think has been set for this defense this past season. That's absolutely the standard. And now it's, hey, go out and keep building on what you've done. And if Al Golden can make even remote improvement over last year's defense, then this is going to be a really special group and a team that does have a chance to do the things that we just talked about. So we're going to kind of follow a similar model to what I did yesterday with the offense. And so we'll talk about just how I'm feeling about the team coming out of spring, where it is right now as they get ready to go into the summer workouts. The players are going to be leaving campus here, I think this week. I believe, some of you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe a lot of the finals are kind of coming up this week, over this next week. And so they're going to be heading home soon. They'll come back over the summer and get ready to start battling. There's going to be some great workouts this summer, going to be great competition this summer, hopefully go into fall camp, which will probably start late July, and then get ready for that August 31st time period, because you have now all of May, all of June, all of July, and then all of August. So you got 4 months to get ready for that game against Texas A&M. And so where is the team right now in that development and in understanding that you do not want to be a finished product in April or May 1st? You're building to something. So body types are not completely set in stone. The depth chart's not completely set in stone. Guys that are going to be breakouts in the fall needed a period of growth in the spring to get to that point. So you may not see the breakout from all the guys. Some guys break out in the spring and they carry it in the fall. We talked about that, like with Jaden Greathouse yesterday. With other guys, it's like, no, the breakout hasn't happened yet, but he needed those ups and downs in the spring to prepare himself from an experiential standpoint, learning things standpoint, to go out there and have the breakout in the fall. And so that's where the process is. So where is Notre Dame in the process? What are the things we feel good about? What are the questions we still have, or the concerns we still have? What are the position battles that still have to be kind of fought as we go through these next 4 months? And then how am I feeling about the team? And so that's the format we're going to follow. The biggest thing to come out of the spring for me, the first thing as I put this format together and this outline together, I try to first and foremost write down what my immediate reaction is. So I write, strengths and positives, and what's my immediate gut reaction. And then I write those down, and then I kind of think through it and then come up just to make sure, okay, am I really hitting the things now that I've thought through it analytically and practically and going through the spring? And that's kind of how I go. But the first thing that popped in my head when I thought, what is the biggest takeaway I had from the spring? It's the depth up the middle. We know about Howard Cross and Riley Mills, and we've had this conversation. You look at the production they had last year. The only tandem in college football last year that remotely had the production that Notre Dame's group did was the trio really at Michigan. And then the Texas double combo of Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy was also outstanding. But there's no question that Notre Dame was in the top 5 at the very least last year when it comes to D-tackle tandems from a production and effectiveness standpoint. You look at what's coming back, Riley Mills and Howard Cross. There's no team that has two players that rank as high in pass rush production and run stops as what this duo did last year. Nobody. Michigan's duo of Kenneth Grant and the Graham kid, Mason Graham, are the closest there is to it. They're better run defenders, I would say, stout guys, where the Notre Dame guys are more disruptive. Michigan's the only tandem, in my opinion, that can make a case for having a better duo coming back than the duo Notre Dame has coming back. But this is a 16-game season now if you want to win a championship. And you can't go through the season the same way you did last year where those two guys dominate the reps, because I've pointed this out before. When you look at the production of the Michigan defenders and you compare it to the production of the Notre Dame defenders, if you're trying to just win an argument to show that Notre Dame's guys are better, then you just say, hey, look, Notre Dame's guys produced X amount of pressures compared to the Michigan guys who produced, fewer amount of pressures or fewer amount of run stops. And you could use that data to make that point, and you could win an argument just by using that data. I prefer to actually provide context and have an honest debate about something. So when I look at the data last year of the Michigan interior guys, you look at Mason Graham had 29 tackles for loss. Kenneth Grant had 23 pressures. Those were both pressures. Chris Jenkins had 20 pressures. And so those guys did pretty well last year. But you look at Notre Dame's top two guys, and last year Howard Cross had 39 pressures and Riley Mills had 32. So Notre Dame's two guys had 71 pressures. Michigan's three guys had 72 pressures. So you're like, hey, that's pretty good, right? Well, Howard Cross played 610 snaps last year. Riley Mills played 535 snaps last year. Michigan's interior, the guy that played the most snaps was Mason Graham at 442. They played two more games than Notre Dame, yet their top guy played about 100 snaps fewer than Notre Dame's second guy when it comes to snaps. Howard Cross played about 170 more snaps last year than Michigan's most active defensive tackle in snaps in two more games. Why was that? Because last year Notre Dame could not justify taking Howard Cross and Riley Mills off the field as much as Michigan could justify taking guys off, because Notre Dame had two guys, Michigan had four. There was a big drop-off from Notre Dame's 1 and 2, meaning their two starters, and 3 and 4. And so you couldn't play those guys as much. Plus, Gabriel Rubio was banged up, and he's a question mark about coming back. The expectation is that he'll return. But until that's announced, it's a question mark. There's clearly things he has to do to return. Well, if he does return, he's got to prove he can stay healthy, something he didn't do last year. He had two different injuries that cost him about 4 or 5 games. And so when they had to go to Jason Onye and Donovan Heinisch, and they did some nice things against inferior opponents, but there was clearly a lack of faith in that group when it came to the better games, the bigger games. And so you had a question mark about the depth, because what's the standard? I don't care that Jason Onye and Donovan Heinisch were good enough to go out there and dominate Central Michigan and Tennessee State and Navy and Pitt and Stanford and teams like that. That's not the standard by which you judge football teams or football players in Notre Dame. Can those guys help you beat Ohio State? Can those guys help you beat Clemson? Can those guys help you beat Louisville? Can those guys help you beat Georgia and Bama and Texas and Michigan? And last year they couldn't. But what we saw this spring is that Notre Dame has a chance to be way better up the middle, because it's not just the two-man duo anymore. You hope to get Gabriel Rubio back. But what we saw all spring from start to finish was Jason Onye taking another big jump. He flashed last spring, and you felt good about his chance to give you some minutes last year. And he did give you some minutes last year. And there were times when Jason Onye was good last year, but it was way too much of this. What we saw this spring is that Jason Onye has the ability to be a difference maker, not just a rotation guy, but a difference maker. That's what made Michigan's interior so good last year. That's what made Georgia's defensive line so good in 2021, is because they could take their starters off the field, put in backups, and their backups were just as good, if not better. They may have just been younger. And Notre Dame did not really have that last year. We thought they had a chance to get to that point, but they didn't really get to that point. Jason Onye's emergence this spring makes me feel way better about that, because he's always been talented. There's no doubt about that. But this spring we saw the talent, but we also saw a motor. We saw a guy that's getting more and more comfortable with how to win using his hands, how to win using leverage, driving his feet through contact when he gets a double team, knowing how to beat it. I mean, the most impressive play I probably saw from a defensive lineman in the spring game wasn't somebody getting around the edge with speed. It was Jason Onye splitting a double team of Sam Pendleton and Billy Schrouth and getting to the quarterback because he showed strength, he showed athleticism, he showed good technique, and he showed a motor and a hunger to make a play. I had somebody say this to me, and I can't remember who it was. And I'm trying to remember who said this to me, but they were spot on. They said not only was Jason Onye the best defensive lineman in the game, he might have been Notre Dame's best player in the spring game, which says a lot. Now, what do I always say? Don't take too much from spring games. Okay. But what do I also say? Did we see it all spring? And what excites me about Jason Onye is not that he had a great spring game. It's that the spring game was a culmination of what we had kind of really seen all spring. That was huge. We saw Donovan Heinisch take another jump as a player this spring. Last year, he had some nice moments, but then he'd get pushed around a little bit. He still gets pushed around a little bit. That's always going to kind of be the case. Howard Cross has that happen to him from time to time. Sometimes when you're 275, 280, and you don't win the leverage battle, you're going to go down. But what I saw from Donovan at times this year is he better understood when that's happening, how to defeat it, how to beat it, or how to, just kind of go down and create a pile in there. So that experience started to kind of come up. And so I was very pleased to see, that growth from him. And then if you can continue that growth into the fall, plus you have Gabriel Rubio, you start feeling pretty good about yourselves. But that's not all. We saw Sean Sevillano in multiple times last spring or this spring start to show some ability. Maybe he could help them, give them 8 to 10 snaps a game, be a big force up the middle. He's got to be more consistent, moving his feet. He's got to get in better shape. But when he's in the game and he keeps his pads level and he anchors and he moves his feet, he's a force up the middle. He can give you 8 to 10 snaps of just that big-bodied presence up the middle. I was very impressed by Brendan Vernon and what I saw from him in the Jersey scrimmage and in the spring game. He showed me some things. Devin Houston showed me some flashes in the spring game to where, the kid that I thought he could be, he's shown me some flashes of that. So that gets me very excited to look at it and say, hey, this D-line has a chance to be really, really good up the middle, not just because of Riley Mills and Howard Cross. It's also because the depth that comes behind it. And watching that depth emerge made me feel a lot better about this defense, because if I'm correct and those guys can come in and provide a much higher level of play this season, then what you'll see from Notre Dame is kind of adopting what Notre Dame did in 2018, which was really effective, which is they would kind of start the game off with Jonathan Bonner and Jerry Tillery. And then after a while, you'd start to see where those two guys were rarely on the field together. It was like Jerry Tillery would be on the field with Kurt Heinisch, and then Jonathan Bonner would be on the field with Myron Tungavaloa-Mosa or Jason Adamiola. Actually, no, Jason didn't play that year. I think it was Myron Tungavaloa-Mosa. And so because you felt good enough about your backups that you could then kind of do a rotation with that. You didn't always have to have your stars on the field together, to where maybe you'll see more of Howard Cross and Jason Onye on the field together, or Riley Mills and Donovan Heinisch on the field together, or Riley Mills and Jason Onye in some kind of combinations therein. To where, hey, look, whoever we have on the field, we can be a player. And why does that matter? Well, it allows you to be stouter against the run, something Notre Dame needs to be better at. It allows you to be more disruptive getting after the quarterback, which is a good thing. It allows you to do a lot of different things. And so when I look at the situation where one of my concerns is going to be linebacker play, this is another reason why you look at it and say, hey, this is a good thing, because now if you're dominant up the middle, no matter who's in the field, that makes life a lot easier for your linebackers. And they're going to need that here with some younger players this spring. So, from what we saw this spring and going into the fall. And so that's another reason why the development of defensive tackle is so important for Notre Dame. Here's another takeaway that I had this spring. This is a very athletic Notre Dame defense on all three levels. And you could even go outside and inside. we just got done talking about the defensive tackles. When you think of a Riley Mills, a Howard Cross, a Jason Onye, you start thinking, what's a lot of athleticism right there up the middle. You look at Josh Burnham on the edge. You look at Boubacar Traore on the edge, RJ Oben on the edge, Bryce Young on the edge. You start saying, boy, there's some athleticism there. Those guys still have to develop as players, but we're just talking athleticism here. That's a very athletic group. This linebacking core is really athletic. I'll get into that in my next point. The cornerback room is athletic. The safety room is very young, very inexperienced. There's a lot to learn, but it's very athletic. Notre Dame is not now just a situation where, well, they got that one really athletic linebacker and everybody else is just kind of okay. Or they've got that one really athletic safety and everybody else is just kind of okay. You know, like this past season, you had Xavier Watts, who's a very athletic player and very talented player, and DJ Brown, not as athletic. Smart kid, great kid, heady kid, always in the right spot, but just not a super athlete. Well, now you're talking about guys going into the spring and you're saying, hey, these guys are stepping up and proving themselves to be very young and raw, but very talented and very athletic. And that certainly helps your football team when you can be that athletic. Why does it help your football team? Well, you know, you can match up speed-wise and all that, but here's the reality of it. The faster you are, the more athletic you are, the greater your margin for error. Because I can be a second slow reading something, but if I'm athletic and rangy, I can still get there as fast as the really smart guy who runs a 4.7. And then when I start getting up a little bit more up here mentally and I'm more comfortable with what I'm doing, and then I'm reacting on time, now I'm blowing stuff up. And so that to me is why it's very important that Notre Dame get into a situation where they have a more rangy athletic football team. And that is certainly something that we've seen from this team in the spring. It's a very athletic defensive football team on all three levels. And the biggest thing is there's been years where Notre Dame was athletic up the middle. You know, Jerry Tiller's a pretty good athlete, your inside linebackers, your safeties, but then they would lack athleticism on the edge, either at defensive end or corner, and sometimes both. And this year you're looking at it saying there's athleticism certainly on the perimeter, but there's also athleticism on the perimeter of the defense. And to me, that's a very big thing for me. And something you need if you're going to have an elite defense. Like we talk about, can they take that next step? Can they take that next step? Well, part of taking that next step is having better talent. And so when I look at this football team, I say, boy, that's where you feel good about it is you have the athleticism and the talent to take that next step as a football team. The last couple things, the linebacker talent, that's a big takeaway for me. Now, I'm going to talk about linebackers in the strengths and the remaining questions. In the strengths, and I talked about this a little bit right after the spring, in the strengths, what you saw is the Notre Dame hit on a lot of these linebacker recruits. They're as talented as you hoped that they would be. Drake Bowen's every bit as talented as we hoped he would be. Jaden Ausberry is. Jalen Sneed's every bit as athletic as we thought he would be. Preston Zinner's as good as I hoped he would be athletically and moving around. Kahanu Kia is better than I thought, way better than I thought he was going to be. And then, of course, Kingston Viliamaasa is everything we hoped he would be. And so you look at this group and you say, boy, there's a lot of question marks, but the one thing that you can't doubt, this is a very athletic, very talented group. And that's one of the positive takeaways that I saw. And then the final really strong takeaway for me this spring was we saw progress from the young safeties. They're not where they need to be, not at all where they need to be, but we saw progress. And that's a good step. Now it's come out of the spring and take another step. But Adon Schuler got a ton of reps this spring, And he's a better player today, May 1st, than he was March 1st, right before spring ball started, because of that experience. And that includes making mistakes, getting run over by Jeremiah Love, not quite getting over on a touchdown pass to Eli Raridan. And you may look at it and say, boy, you know, he got beat on those plays. He didn't make that play. Good. And as a coach, you say that's good because he needs to understand why the attention to detail is so important, why this read is so important, why you've got to do this, why you've got to do that. And a lot of times when a kid is as talented as a guy like Adon Schuler, he can be a hard worker, and he is. He can be a tough kid, and he is. But it's one thing to be that way when you're still the most athletic guy on the field. And when you're that way, and it's like, I'm not always the most athletic guy in the field. And a lot of times I'm not the most athletic guy in the field. Then it's like, okay, I have a greater understanding for the little things that maybe I thought I appreciated, but didn't quite appreciate. That's a good thing for Adon. That's going to make him better. Luke Tallich, same thing. It's going to make him better. Ben Minnick, it's going to make him better. And I finally got a chance to see Kennedy Urlacher in coverage. And while he needs a lot of technical work, I loved the way he ran. I mean, I had said that I thought Kennedy could run well, but it's kind of hard to evaluate at times. And when I watched in the spring, you're like, okay, yeah, he runs pretty well. He's going to have a chance to be a player at Notre Dame. So I feel a lot better about the safety position coming out of the spring, knowing that Xavier Watts is still there, knowing that Rod Hurd's going to show up this summer, knowing that Jordan Clark could play there if there's a need, that you say, okay, we saw enough growth of those young players to say it's a positive. Now, having said that, let's get into, when we get into the concerns, I'm going to talk about the safeties again. And so that's where it's interesting, is two of the things that I'm talking about as strengths and things I feel good about are also things that I look at and say they're going to be questions as well. But at the end of the day, I come out of spring saying that they've got a lot of athleticism all across the field. There's somebody in the chat talking about being worried about defensive tackle. I'm really not, because I loved the awakening we saw this spring from Jason Onye and Donovan Heinisch and Sean Sevillano and Devin Houston to a degree and Brendan Vernon to a degree. And so I'm very happy with that. There's nobody in the portal to me that's going to help you better than what Jason Onye can do for you based on what we saw this spring and the growth he continues to show each and every year as a football player. And so those are all areas where I say, hey, I like where this football team is. I really like this football team, where this team is. And so can they take that next step? Well, it's going to be because of these things. These things continuing to grow and get stronger and stronger are going to be why. And then you're going to have to also improve on your questions. And we'll get into that next. Before we do me a favor, folks, hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. And if you've not done so, in the 10 seconds, I'm going to take a break here to take a drink of this so I can, make sure that my voice lasts the next however long we're here together. Go ahead and sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So I've got some portal thoughts that I shared on the board already. Going to share some more here very soon, and always going to have a lot of good stuff on there that you're just not going to get anywhere else, including this podcast. So check that out at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right. Part 2 of this segment is going to get into the questions that still remain. And I'm going to kind of reverse and work in reverse order of how we talked about the strengths. So I went strengths, D tackle depth. We talked about the athleticism. We talked about the linebacker talent, and we talked about how the safeties made progress. Now let's work in reverse order. Yes, the safeties made progress. Having said that, safety is still a question mark for me on this defense, because progress is good, but progress does not mean you've reached the end of your journey. And when you talk about the young safeties, they all made progress. Every single one made progress. Devin Ford made progress as he transitions over from running back. But progress, to me, does not equal you've arrived and you're ready to be great and you're ready to go out there and be the guy. That still remains to be seen. It remains to be seen with Adon, Luke, Ben, Kennedy, and Devin. And so there's still a lot to learn about this group. We still need to see what Rod Hurd can do. I really liked Rod Hurd and the way that Northwestern used him as in the nickel. I don't think he quite fits the Notre Dame nickel as well, at least the way they've used it. They could adjust it and use him in a way that more fits his skill set if they needed him to. But I think his skill set fits really nicely into that boundary safety position. But how will he make the adjustment? We really don't know. I think he'll be fine, but we really don't know. We got to see it. And then with Adon Schuler, Adon made great strides throughout the spring. But that got him to the point where you're like, hey, he can help you next year. But help you how? Right now, it's help you as a rotation guy. If he can build on the spring and clean up some of the little things that you saw, some of the technical things, taking the proper angle to the football more consistently, being prepared for a running back to dip a shoulder on you, but also not being overly prepared for that to the point where he can then juke you and make you miss. those are the little things that Adon still has to learn. And what I was encouraged by in the Jersey scrimmage and the spring game was how much Adon communicates. I mean, I'm watching the blue and gold game again the other day, and I'm watching Adon like talking to the other safety, and I think it was Kennedy, and then they go in motion, and Adon's getting people lined up and communicating, and all that stuff is great. He needs to do those type of things. Now it's about take that and apply that to where you're a more consistent player. And that's going to be a big part of what Adon needs to do as he continues to grow. Same with Luke Talich. There are times when I'm like, boy, this guy Luke Talich can start for you. And then there's times where there's a hesitancy with Luke and where he's just not quite, just let it rip, man. Just stop thinking so much and just go. Be assertive. Make a decision and go. And you want to see that more from him. And again, same with Ben Minnick, just being in better position more often, staying healthy. Those are all things that we saw growth in, but they're not where they need to be. They're not ready today on May 1st to go play and beat Texas A&M because of that unit, because of that group. They're just not there yet. But here's the good news. They don't have to play Texas A&M on May 1st. They play Texas A&M on August 31st. So there's lots of time for that group to grow. They took a nice growth during the spring, but now it's about build on that. Don't get complacent. Don't do any of those type of things. Build on that and get to that and become that type of football team. And so that's where the safety position still needs to go. And the same thing with the linebacker position. Linebacker position is the same exact way of what I was talking about. The talent we saw this spring was really impressive, really impressive. But it's not where it needs to be yet. I liked a lot of what I saw from Drake Bowen in the spring game, but there were still too many times where he would either be in the wrong gap or attack the proper gap at an angle that allowed him to kind of get sealed off inside a little easier than he should. It's a little thing, but it's a little thing that could be the difference between you stoning a guard in the hole and then coming off for a 2-yard gain, or a guy coming off outside of you for a 6 to 8 yard gain, or potentially even bigger. And so those are things that Drake's going to have to get better at. It's just, look, the range is excellent. The playmaking ability is really good. The pressures were really good. Drake's going to make a lot of plays next year. But what he's going to have to do, and this is also true for Kingston, because Kingston had a lot of the same issues. What those two are going to both have to do is, you flash. When you do good things, you are really, really good. But we can't have you coming downhill and hitting the wrong gap or fitting incorrectly into the gap that you had, or you're attacking the proper gap, but you attacked it here instead of here, and that allowed that linebacker to wash you out instead of you hitting him, or the guard, instead of you coming down and hitting him on that outside shoulder and stoning him right in the hole, you went wide, which allowed him to step out to you. And then when you engaged and you stoned him, sure, you hit the guy you're supposed to hit, but because you did it a 1.5 feet out wider than you should have, that opened up a 1.5 feet wider hole for the run game. Those little things are the difference between me blowing up a play and them gaining 8 yards. And there were times when Kingston would do that. There were times when Kingston came downhill a little uncertain of what he was doing, and he made himself very blockable, right? It's working that stuff out is going to be really important for Kingston and Drake as you transition into this offseason. Jalen Snead's going to have to turn his athleticism into more plays. He just doesn't make enough plays for his athleticism. He's got to do more of that. Jaden Osbury did a lot of good things, but again, it's consistency. When he's on, he's really good, but you've got to be more consistent. Preston Zinner, same thing. There were some really impressive plays from Preston Zinner this spring, but then there's also plays where you're like, now you got to fit harder than that, or you've got to fit correctly better than that. You read correctly, you flowed over the top, but you read it late. So you've got to read it faster. So all those things are correctable things. They're technical things. They're experiential things. We just need more reps doing it. We saw growth from that group, but we also have to understand as we evaluate this linebacker core that as excited as we are about how they played in the spring, and we should all be excited about the talent in that room, there's also a lot of room for needed improvement. And I'm not someone who is of the belief that because they lost Maris Leofau and J.D. Bertrand, they have no chance of being better last year. I think that's very short-sighted. I think that there's certainly going to be more mistakes at linebacker this year than last year. I don't think that's debatable. But the opposite of that is this is a more talented and athletic group even than what last year's group was. And they were clearly talented and athletic. They were third and a fifth round draft pick. But I think this group has more playmaking ability. And so, yes, they're going to give up more mistakes, but they're going to make more plays. The key for them, however, is to limit how many more mistakes they make. I don't expect them to go out and say, hey, Drake Bowen, game one, you need to be, 95% being correct like JD Bertrand was last year. No, it's like, I just need you to not be at 70, right? Like that's the thing is I need you to be at like 80, 85 at least, and then we can work on getting you to 90, 95. And so that's going to be the key is how frequently can they make those adjustments? Because look, game 1 and game 5 are going to be 2 games where those little mistakes can result in big plays. And that's going to be the key because you have a very young and inexperienced linebacker core next year outside of Jack Kaiser. Now, that's going to be another thing that's still a question to me because we haven't seen Jack play a ton this spring from what we saw. He played some in the Jersey scrimmage and looked fine, but he didn't play much in the blue gold game. Actually, I don't remember actually seeing him in the blue gold game, although I'm pretty sure that he played because I think I saw him in the stat sheet. So that was the other thing too, is they didn't play Jack Kaiser a whole lot in the spring game, which meant they wanted to give those young guys those reps. And we saw some good things. Kahano Kia had a very productive spring, but there's a lot of snaps where he got overwhelmed. You can tell he's just not, the strength isn't there yet, or he would fit a little too wide, which allowed him to get blocked, or he would fit a little bit too narrow, which allowed him to get logged and driven to the ground on Kyron Williams' touchdown run. So those are all things that they have to get better. They can't be on August 31st what they were on May 1st. They can't be. But again, that's the good news because they're not going to be the same player on August 31st. The question is how much growth happens. And so that's what the spring is a great period because Drake Bowen got a ton of reps this spring. Kingston got a ton of reps this spring. Same with Jaden Osbury, Kahanu Kia, Preston Zinner, Jalen Sneed, all of them. And then you're going to welcome Bodie Cahoon and Teddy Rizak as well. So I'm excited about where the linebacking core is, but I'm also understanding that I'm excited about where they are, much like I am with the offensive line, relative to where I expected them to be through the spring. But that's different than where they need to be in the fall. So when you look at this linebacker position, you look at the safety position, those two things are still concerns / question marks as we go out of the spring into the fall. I'm excited about the potential of those groups. But as I said earlier, when I was on the show with Mark Rogers, what I say all the time on the show, when I'm talking about a football player that's starting for me or in my rotation, the one word I don't want to use for them is potential. Because if I'm still using the word potential about a guy that's playing for me right now, it means he's not producing the way I need him to. And I'm still talking about what he can be instead of what I need him to be. So we'll talk about, Drake Bowen, no matter how good he is this year, we'll still talk about the potential for him to get better. But what we don't want to do is be talking about, well, he struggled in this game, but the potential is there. So you keep going with him. You want him to have a level of you want him to raise the floor from where he was at the end of the spring on April 20th to where he'll need to be on August 31st. And that's true for all the linebackers. It's true for Kingston. It's true for Drake. It's true for Jaden Osbury. It's true for Jalen Sneed, Preston Zinner, Kahano Kia, the whole group. I'm excited about the potential, but they've got to continue to get better. Same with the safety position. Is showed growth, but they're not where they need to be yet. I will say I'm even more excited about where the linebackers were relative to the safeties, just because I think there's just more dynamic players at the linebacker position than safety. But two of the areas where I did see growth still remain a question mark because they're just not there yet. And that's going to be the next step for them. Next one for me is still a question mark is Benjamin Morrison's injury. Now, where I disagree with some people in the chat is I saw somebody say that Notre Dame can't be a top 10 defense if Benjamin Morrison's out. I don't agree with that. I absolutely think Notre Dame can be a top 10 defense this year if Benjamin Morrison doesn't play. There's not a doubt in my mind. I think Christian Gray could go into the boundary and be an outstanding player. I think Christian Gray is a sophomore, can be every bit as good as what Benjamin Morrison was as a sophomore. I don't think he can be as good as Benjamin Morrison as a junior, but I think he can be as good or close to what Benjamin Morrison was last year. And Jaden Mickey can do a lot of good things as a football player as well. I mean, we saw a game where those two kids had to play almost the entire game, and Notre Dame shut that team down, despite the fact that team had, a wide receiver that went and got drafted, but in Bub Means. So we've seen that group play well. I absolutely think Notre Dame can be a top 10 defense without Benjamin Morrison. What I don't know and what I have doubts about is, can they be a top 5 to top 3 defense without Benjamin Morrison? And my answer there is no, they can't. And so, yes, those guys are good, but Benjamin Morrison is Benjamin Morrison for a reason. It's not, oh, he's a product of the system. He's an outstanding talent, and you're clearly going to be better with him. I don't think there's going to be a big drop off without him. But what I don't think you can do is rise into that top 3 to 5 or potentially number 1 category without him being healthy. I don't. And it's for 2 reasons. One is you have arguably the best cover corner in college football not in your lineup. That hurts. Can you still play at a certain level this year as a top 10 type of level without him? Yeah, because the 2 guys there are pretty good. But if he's there, then those 2 guys don't have to carry the load, and they can do some other things. And so a lineup with Christian Gray and Benjamin Morrison in it is better than one without Benjamin Morrison. And then now either Christian or Jaden can be a bit of a swing guy, which helps you as well. You have different matchups you can get into. There may be some games next year where it's like, look, we got to ride with Christian and Benjamin because we're playing this team that's got a bunch of fast guys, and we need our 2 best corner guys to handle these vertical players. Then there's going to be other games where you're playing a team that has runs a lot of perimeter screens and a lot of perimeter runs and a lot of quick game and a lot of intermediate throws. And that's a game where Jaden Mickey's going to feast. So having those 3 guys together gives you some matchup ability that you lose if it's just 2 of them, whether it's just Benjamin and Jaden or Benjamin and Christian or Christian and Jaden. And so those are all things that you have to look at and say, hey, they're better if all 3 of them are there. I also think you're better if Jaden Mickey can be a bit of a swing guy as opposed to just being the guy. And that's also something that factors into it as well. So can they have a top 10 defense without Benjamin Morrison being healthy all year? Sure. It's harder, but you can. But I know that you're going to have a top 10 defense with him. And I know that with him, you have a chance to be in the top 5. I don't know the status of his injury. I really don't. I don't know if it's major. I don't know if it's no big deal. I truly don't know. This isn't me saying, boy, I'm concerned about it. I'm saying I don't know. He could be back first day of fall camp. I don't know. He could not be back till the 4th game of the year. I truly don't know. All that Notre Dame told us is he's going to be back in the fall. I don't know what that means. And what does it mean? Fall meaning fall camp? Does that mean the actual fall? Because doesn't the actual fall begin later in the season? So, that's how Notre Dame kind of is sometimes. But you're going to need Benjamin Morrison back at the very least, even if he doesn't play the first couple games. You're going to need him back by Louisville and playing high level at Louisville to really go on that run as the season comes to an end. My last 2 questions about the defense. I still have some uncertainty about the nickel position. I like Jordan Clark. I'm not as high on Jordan Clark as I was on Thomas Harper coming in. And I need to see him kind of perform. You don't have the depth at the position. You lost Clarence Lewis. You lost Micah Bell. You've had to move Jaden Osbury out there a little bit. Maybe Rod Hurd can help you there. Maybe Jaden Mickey could help you there. I'm not quite sure what they're going to do there. And so that's a position that I still look at and say, I'm not saying it's going to be an issue for Notre Dame, because I think Jordan Clark's a good enough player to where it's not going to be an issue for them, but it can be an issue if he gets banged up at all, if he maybe doesn't perform to the level that we hope. There's no clear line of succession now at nickel. You're going to have to do more, base defense with Jalen Sneed out there or Jaden Osbury out there. Those are things that you're going to have to do if Jordan Clark is either A, not effective, or B, just gets hurt. So nickel's still a little bit of a question. And then my last one is the edge rush. That's still a question mark for me. We saw some good things in the spring game from RJ Open had a couple nice pressures and Bryce Young looked good. And I thought Josh Burnham played really well. So the defensive end position, I have a lot more confidence in. I think at the very least, it's going to match what we saw last year. The Viper position is still a concern for me. You know, we see some moments where Jordan Patelho looks great, and we saw it in some practices. And I know some people that were at some practices that I wasn't at that talked about how dominant he was. But then we get out to the Jersey scrimmage, and he doesn't do a whole lot. We get to the blue gold game, he doesn't do a whole lot. He has 2 bad penalties that are just things that should be happening about, your freshman or sophomore, not as a fifth-year guy. Well, those are all things you look at and you just get frustrated, like, man, how does this keep happening to a fifth-year senior? You got to be smarter than that. And that's a concern. I've yet to see Junior Telemaka show me that he can be an edge rusher at all. I mean, I keep hearing about how good he is in practice and different times, and then we just never see it. Whenever it's a scrimmage or whatever, he had a nice tackle for loss at the beginning of the Jersey scrimmage, and then he didn't see him the rest of the game. Saw him in the blue gold game. It's like he just doesn't provide much pass rush. Boubacar provides a really good pass rush, but he's still inconsistent in a lot of ways. He'll still hit, there's a time where he kind of comes out and then works an inside move, and that just allows the quarterback to easily step outside of and run for 15 yards. Like, you can't have those kind of plays. So, yeah, Boubacar has a great first step. He shows potential, but he still has to learn to do those little things better. Is he ready to be a full-time guy or not? So the edge rush is still a concern for me. It is. And I'm Jordan Patelho could be a guy that ultimately, you want to talk about what's the thing that allows this team to go from being a top 10 to 12 defense to a top 3 to 5 defense. It could very well be Jordan Patelho having a breakout season, or Boubacar Traore having the light go on and showing off his first round ability this season. So Viper position is the last one for me that still leaves me a little bit of a, I hope that they can figure that out, because that's still a question mark for me. So those are the things I look at, things I'm excited about from this defense, things that I got to see more from this defense, things that they got to get better at. I love the progress they've made. And I can sit here and say those things are question marks about moving forward, but I like where the team is on May 1. Does that make sense? So, yes, it's got to get better by August 31st, but I'm going to go into fall camp feeling like everywhere except maybe, even Viper, but right now, even maybe everywhere except maybe nickel, I feel like I know who the potential answers could be. They just got to step up and play and show that they're answers. And so that's something that we have to find. And when I say that about nickel, it's because Jordan Clark's, ends up being a good player, but what else is there? Who else plays there? Can it be Osbury? Can it be Snead? Can it be Rod Hurd? Can it be one of the corners? Can it be Jaden Mickey? I don't know the answers to that. And that's something that Notre Dame is going to have to find an answer for as we get into the fall and that we get closer and closer to them playing Texas A&M. Last bit about the defense as we kind of look at the state of the team right now is there are still some position battles that are kind of going on, including defensive end. Now, I believe Jordan Patelho is right now entrenched as a starter. There's nothing we've seen to make us think that he's not going to be the starter. Does he hold on to that? Does he get better? Is there going to be competition there? We'll see. The field end position, the defensive end position, I think is still a battle. Obviously, RJ Oben was brought in to be the starter there. I thought Josh Burnham had a very good spring. Now he needs to build on what he did this spring. And I think Josh Burnham actually has a chance to maybe emerge as the starter there. Or at least if they start RJ Oben to kind of keep him locked in, that you could look back at the end of the game and be like, the snaps were pretty even. And then actually in times, maybe Josh got more snaps in certain situations. And then, of course, what role does Bryce Young force himself into? That's a bit of a question mark. So I think that the defensive end position, how the depth chart shakes out, we kind of know who the ones are kind of, but what about the twos and what about the threes and what's the rotation going to look like? Linebacker battles are still going to rage. I think there's just this assumption that they're going to go into the fall and the starting linebackers when they're in base defense is going to be Jalen Cedar-Rover, Drake Bowen at Mike, and Jack Kaiser at will. Pretty sure Jack Kaiser is going to start, but I don't think it's set in stone that the other two are going to start. They've got to grow. They've got to get better and better and better. If Drake Bowen just stagnates from now until August 31st, and Kingston Villamasa or Kahanu Kia or Preston Zinner take off, then, Drake's going to have a battle on his hands. So same thing at Rover with Jalen Sneed. So those are things that you look at and say, there's still a battle going on. And that's a good thing for me, because I do think Drake Bowen has a chance to be excellent, but he's got to grow. And having that sort of what's behind you knowledge and awareness, not to the point where it drives you and that's the reason you're doing what you're doing every day, but to the point where you say to yourself, hey, I got to be locked in today because I can't afford to have a bad day today. Not only am I letting my defense down, but there's some dudes behind me that are pretty good football players too. And I think that can make you better if you handle it correctly. So that's why I say linebacker there's still some battles to rage at linebacker. Field cornerback to me is still one that I look at and say, I don't know that we know who the starter is going to be there yet. We're obviously going to see Christian Gray play there some. We're going to see Jaden Mickey play there some. But who is the guy there? Will there be a guy there? Is it just they're both good enough to play and say we're going to have a rotation? Does one guy step up and say, hey, this is my job, right? This is where I'm at. And who will that guy be? I don't know. I don't know who that's going to be. And so the field cornerback position is one, and then the boundary safety. Can a Don Schuler build on his spring and maybe become the starter, and then Rod Hurd becomes the rotation guy? Does Rod Hurd step in? How quickly does he pick up the defense? Does he become the starting boundary for Notre Dame next year? Those are all question marks that to me still have to be answered, and we don't know the answer to those questions. So when I look at the position battles, I think that's where a lot of it is. So I'd say field corners for a starter job, linebacker to a degree to a starter job, but there's also some battles for depth. Let's say Drake Bowen locks down the Mike linebacker job and Jack Kaiser locks down the starting Will job. Well, who's that next guy in the rotation? Is it Kingston? Is it Preston Zinner? Is it Kahanu Kia? Is it Jalen Sneed coming inside? Is it going to be Jaden Osberg coming inside? So I think there's a lot of battles at linebacker to be had. And then, of course, we talked about the edges. So those are the battles that I think that we're going to see rage this spring this fall for Notre Dame. And how they shake out is going to tell us a lot about who this football team is going to be on defense. I really do. And how those questions get answered. So at the end of this, I talk about how am I feeling? Well, I'm feeling much more confident right now about the opportunity for Notre Dame to at least maintain what they were. Coming into the spring, I knew they had a chance to at least maintain, but there were some questions that had to get answered. Was I right about Drake Bowen's talent? Was I right about Jaden Osbury's talent? Was I right about, Josh Burnham's talent? Did I get it right when I said Jason Onye has a high ceiling, or am I wrong? He just is what he is. So there were a lot of things that you thought you hoped for this spring. Is Kingston really as good as we all think he can be? And then we saw it with our eyes, and you say, okay, all right, he's talented. He's got ability. I don't know if he's going to be a great player, but he's at least got some ability. Okay, this guy can play. This guy can help you out. So I'm much more confident today than I was at the beginning of spring that they'll at least maintain what they were last year, which then also enhances the potential that they're going to be even better. I'm not ready to make that prediction yet. There's still more we got to see, but I am way more comfortable today on May 1st that Notre Dame is at least going to be able to repeat its performance last year, not so much directly statistically everywhere, but from an impact standpoint, what they did last year, improve in some areas, maybe be not quite as good in others, but overall, same level of impact play, which means, like people said earlier, it's a championship caliber defense, but it's a championship caliber defense that still needs its offense to play better. And it's not quite that carry the team type of unit yet. Can carry it to 9-10 wins, but not carry it to the postseason and then a run in the postseason. It's not there yet. But I am not nearly as concerned about it taking a step back right now as I was to kick the spring off, even with Benjamin Morrison's injury and some of those other questions. I feel very good about the trajectory and the growth that we saw from the defense this spring. I'm going to move over to the portal conversation next, folks. But this is going to end the defensive conversation. Before we get to the portal talk, do me a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family, give us a 5-star review, and as always, check out the merch store at Irish Breakdown, but then also sign up for the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Cool thing is the link to the stores in the description box below, but you can also find it on our board's website. If you see at the top, it'll say IB store. You can go there as well. If you've not signed up for the message board and you would like to get some IB gear, you'd like to support us, sign up. And if you're a monthly member, you get a 10% discount code for an entire purchase in your IB merch store. If you sign up for an annual membership, you get a 20% off discount to the IB merch store. So keep that in mind. If you want some merch and you want to sign up for the board, do those two things together, but do the board first and then use that discount code to do some action in the merch store later. So that's one of the perks of being an IB member. If you sign up for one of the Booster Club members, you actually get some free merch from the merch store that only goes to club members. So check that out as well at the boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, let's dive into topic 2 today, and that is the transfer portal. And we're going to talk about a lot of different parts of the transfer portal today because I will admit I am surprised by the lack of movement we saw from the portal. We saw Clarence Lewis jump in during the spring. We saw Micah Bell jump in right after the spring. Other than that, no movement. Now, there is a deadline coming up here later today for graduates to jump in. But from what I was told, talking to different sources, they don't expect anybody to jump in today, which honestly surprised a lot of people, including me. Not just me, but including me. So what does that mean? What does that mean for Notre Dame? Well, we'll dive into what it means for them from a football team standpoint. But I want to talk about first what it means about Notre Dame, and I don't think this is something that you just look at and flippantly be like, no big deal, right? And so I look at it and I say, hey man, I look at this football team and I say, okay, I expected this guy to go, I expected that guy to go, I expected a couple guys here and there to go, and they didn't. So what does that mean? Why? And I talked to several sources as well, and they were like, the coaches had some very harsh conversations with players and let them know, like, hey, look, we love you, we'd love to keep you, but just so you know, you're not going to be, you're going to have a tough time getting on the field next year, or veteran, you're running the risk of maybe somebody beating you out. And there was a thought that when they had that conversation with certain players, that those players would leave. And it didn't happen, with one exception. It didn't happen. And so now Notre Dame sits here and they're at 86 scholarships right now. They're one above the 85. And getting down to 85 or below won't be a problem because there's a couple guys that I anticipate eventually going on a medical hardship, so they won't count towards the 85. But so it's not that, but it does somewhat limit your ability to make moves in the portal if you wanted to go add somebody. So that certainly impacts you, but it's the why that's been getting to me. So I've spent a lot of my morning on the phone and just calling different people and trying to have as many conversations as I could about this. And what it shows is several things. Number one, there's a lot of buy-in from the players still left on the team. It tells me that Notre Dame is now this is a projection on my part, but I believe they've weeded out a lot of the guys that didn't have the buy-in you need to have for this program. There's some guys that left after the season because they did have a lot of portal departures after the season, but you kind of needed that. Some guys that got beat out that didn't want to stay and compete or were just flat out told, you're not going to play here, and they chose to leave. Some guys left on their own accord because they didn't want to play for Notre Dame anymore, and there was a lot of issues at wide receiver and things along those lines. But what it seems to me and what I'm hearing from people is there's a high level of buy-in from the players that are here, even the guys that are battling to keep their jobs or to get on the field. And so there's not as much of that cancerous nature left on the team as much, where, and there's still some guys I'm concerned about. I don't know if the coaches are concerned about it, but I'm concerned about. But that number's small, and there's always going to be guys like that. The 1988 team had guys like that. The 93 team had guys like that. That you're just like, man, that guy's a problem. He's always trying to start some stuff. But if the culture's strong enough around it, then that stuff doesn't matter. And if the number of those people is small enough, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't impact your football team. And so it sounds like there's a lot of buy-in. There's a lot of guys that have bought into what Marcus Freeman is selling. And they think they have a shot to be something special this year. The staff has also made it very clear to players that the 2024 team is going to be different. You're going to have positions where maybe the percentage of snaps is not as vast as it was between number one and number two, because not only do you not have the experience at some positions, but you're trying to go win 16 games and say, hey man, like, you can't play Riley Mills and Howard Cross 600 snaps in the regular season when you then have to go to the postseason and play 4 more games to win a title. So I think that's helped a little bit as well, is there's more guys that think they have a chance to play. It's not just going to be 3 linebackers dominating the reps next year. So if you're not in the top 3 at the end of the spring, you'll need to leave because you're still going to get a chance to play. So I think there's a lot of that as well. And the staff has done a really good job with that, but there's a lot of buy-in. And the other part is the 4 for 40. I think what you're seeing right now is the 4 for 40 is incredibly impactful, because you're seeing some guys that are saying, hey, you know what? I know I'm not going to play this next year. I'm not going to play much, but getting that degree from Notre Dame is more important than, and not playing as much, or maybe not playing, or maybe getting beat out, is more important to me than transferring somewhere, not being able to graduate from Notre Dame in a year or two. And then, sure, I get to play football, but I don't have a Notre Dame degree. And there's a lot of kids that understand, because they're seeing it happen to other kids, that when you make that move in the middle of your college career, it puts off your chances of graduating, period, much less from Notre Dame. There's a lot of kids struggling to transfer places, and they're realizing they're not going to take all my credits. And so I'm transferring as a junior, but now I'm back to being a sophomore academically. So unless I stay for a 5th year, I'm not getting a bachelor's degree. Whereas I could stay at Notre Dame and get a bachelor's degree in 4 years. And if the coach is willing to have me, I can walk out here in 5 years and get a bachelor's and a master's from Notre Dame, or I can transfer to Georgia Tech, lose half my credits, and then in 5 years get a bachelor's degree. And that's having a big impact as well. And so it's having it's when I say it's having an impact, it's a curse and a blessing. The blessing is obvious. You've got buy-in. You've got kids that want to do the right things, because a kid's not going to stay here to get that degree if he's not willing to put in the work to get the degree. More often than not, there's always some exceptions. It's a bit of a curse, because I do think that the staff would have been okay with some guys leaving, because then it could have allowed them to go into the portal and pick up a couple guys in the spring portal. So it's a very interesting situation. It really is. And so I look at it and I say, man, this is, I mean, I'm going to keep using the word interesting, because I'm really floored by it. I'm very surprised about the lack of movement that we saw. And somebody mentioned the punter. I forgot about the punter. But again, why did he leave? He left because he was basically getting beat out. So Notre Dame is in a unique situation where they have to adjust a little bit to what they're doing in the portal, because it's going to be a little harder for them to go out there and get a scholarship player at certain positions. So at cornerback, for example, that's one to think about. It's a couple guys that I felt Notre Dame had a pretty good shot to get, but now they're in a situation where they may not be able to go get a portal corner. They may have to go scholarship corner. They may have to go a different route. And that route's going to, could potentially be a route that we've seen a lot of this past year. And yet, when you look at the portal, there's a lot of people when it happened, and the one-time transfers and all this kind of stuff, well, that's going to kill Notre Dame. And I think what we've learned here in the last couple of years is Notre Dame's going to lose guys. Notre Dame's always lost guys to the portal and always lost transfers. Going back to 1988, Arnold Ali, was a guy that played a lot as a freshman at Notre Dame, started in some games for a team that won a title, still left after his freshman year. Braxton Banks transferred. I mean, the guys are going to transfer. Lou Holtz had Graham transfer out, and Dorsey Levens. There were guys that left. Everyone's going to have guys that leave. But the fact that Notre Dame did not have the losses that plagued so many other teams, I think says a lot about what makes Notre Dame unique and how the reality for Notre Dame in the portal is different for a lot of people. And that's something that I find very, very fascinating. And when you look at the additions that they've been able to make, the net positive for Notre Dame as far as portal additions has been excellent. I mean, you got a quarterback, you didn't lose one. You lost Braylon James, you lost Rico Flores, you lost Tobias Merriweather. You added Bo Collins, Chris Mitchell, and Jaden Harrison. I'd say that's a net positive. You didn't lose any tight ends. You lost Zeke Correll to the portal because he got beat out. Oh, okay, you can live with that. You look at the defensive line. You didn't have any guys go, but you added R.J. Oben. And so you look at the secondary. You had Micah Bell leave, Clarence Lewis leave. You added Rod Hurd. And then you've got a decent-sized freshman class coming in. So Notre Dame is in a very interesting situation where the portal has been very good to them. And then on top of that, what you're seeing is that Marcus Freeman and Chad Bowden are implementing a very unique strategy. Because one thing that I've had Notre Dame coaches complain to me about for as long as I've been covering this team is that Notre Dame tends to have a smaller roster than most teams. Notre Dame sometimes under Brian Kelly would have sometimes up to, 100 guys on the roster. They would have, I think the last couple of years, they were around 110 or so the last few years. When in reality, you need to be minimum 120, 130 to really have the kind of roster you need that functions. And what does that mean? It means having a proper scout team, and not just numbers wise, but also the type of talent you're bringing in. I remember talking to a coach when Brian Kelly was here who worked with Brian Kelly at Cincinnati, and he talked about, man, we'd go out and get like MAC level players and guys that could play at our level, and we could convince them to come walk on at Cincinnati because in-state tuition was so low and they were going to get enough financial aid and scholarship money that they were basically on scholarship, but they were walk-ons. Ohio State does that a bunch. Michigan does that. Well, they'll get these good football players that are in-state kids that'll walk on because it's $10,000 to $15,000 a year. And sometimes kids will get enough money to where they're not even paying that to go walk on at Ohio State, as opposed to going and playing at Cincinnati or going and playing at Toledo or going to play. Those are good football players. And so what Notre Dame is in a situation of, they can only bring in 5 to or so preferred walk-ons a year. And it's a lot harder to get the kind of walk-ons that can really help your football team, because to get a kid to turn down going to an Indiana State or a Central Michigan or something like that, you have to convince that kid that you're going to have to come here, get in on your own, and spend $60,000+ a year to go to school here. That evaporates your options for high school portal kids. And so while the staff has done a great job, in my opinion, of finding really good walk-on type of players like Jordan Faison and Luke Talich and guys like that are good players, the reality is the number of those type of guys is limited. And so what you've seen the last couple of years, and you're really seeing it this year, is Notre Dame is utilizing the portal to bring in a lot of transfers, and a lot of transfers that are actually good football players that can help you in certain ways. And that's been a very fascinating reality for this football team as I look at how they're building the roster. And there's going to be some more from what I've been told. I've talked to some sources. There's going to be some more guys that are going to transfer into Notre Dame, because so you understand, the deadline today was simply the deadline for jumping into the portal. You don't have to make a decision today. This is just what players need to do to go in. And so what Notre Dame has done is they've gone out into the portal and they found some guys can help their football team in a lot of different ways. And you're trying to have them help your football team in during the week and then also on Saturday. And here's what I mean. Some of these kids that Notre Dame is getting in the portal, you look at a kid like Grant Ristoff, who transferred in from, I believe, Penn last season. comes in from an Ivy League school, was a pretty quality football player at that Ivy League school, but he knows he's not an NFL player. And he's not like Thor Griffith or Chris Smith, who are guys that, had chances to maybe be NFL football players. That's not who, Grant Ristoff is. So he comes into Notre Dame as a walk-on, goes from being a starter rotation guy at Penn to being a scout team player at Notre Dame. But what that does is he's bought in, but he comes to Notre Dame and he says, hey, this is my role. I'm going to play it as hard as I can, which means when you're going against the other team scout team, you may be going against a walk-on in Grant Ristoff, but you're going against a 6'3", 250-pound kid who was a quality player at the Ivy League. Is that going to be the same as playing against Georgia's edge players? No, but that's going to give you a look. And then there's guys that they've landed in this portal cycle. Notre Dame just the other day got a commitment from a young man named Jake Tefelsky. 6 foot, 220-pound kid, redshirt sophomore, has, I think, 2 years of eligibility left. And you look at him and say, well, how's this guy going to help you? In his career, he had 7 carries for 21 yards in his career. When he had 6 catches for 40-some yards in his career. Like, is that guy going to move the needle? Is that guy going to come rush for 1,000 yards for you? No, he's not. But from everything I've been told and some of the film I've looked at, this is a pretty strong athletic kid that can be a special team starter for you. So you're going to get a 6 foot, 220-pound kid that plays running back, that's going to be part of your scout team, that can also help you on Saturday as a special teams guy. You didn't have to spend a scholarship on him. He's going to come here. He's going to pay his own way. And for him, he's going to get a degree from the University of Notre Dame. And he's going to play an important role that you just are going to be hard to find in the high school walk-on ranks. Notre Dame got a commitment from another young man that's going to be coming to play for them next year from Pennsylvania, a kid that played at Colgate, the last few seasons by the name of Max Hurleman, who's going to be coming to Notre Dame next year from what I understand. And this is a kid that you look at him and he played in the Ivy League during his career. He's rushed for over 800 yards in his career. Didn't play as much this year. Has one more season of eligibility left. 800 career rushing yards. He also caught the ball a decent amount. This year only carried the ball 7 times, but he caught 28 passes for 273 yards. He's got 3 career receiving touchdowns, 841 career receiving yards. So this is a kid with over 1,600 yards to Ivy League level. Is he going to come in and beat out Jeremiah Love? No. Is he going to come out and beat Jadarian Price out? No. Is he going to beat out Kedron Young? No. But what he does is he gives you a 6 foot, 200-pound kid who is athletic, who is smart, who can give you a great look on scout team, maybe help you a little bit in the slot if the need is there, be a running back if there's some injury issues, but then go be a starter on special teams, because this is a kid that's helped you in special teams. And so they're getting more kids like that. And so the portal has really been a very unique 3-layered, 3-tiered thing for Notre Dame, where obviously there's the players leaving, but they've been able to hold on to more players than maybe some of us thought they would. They have been able to add impact players. And people say, well, Sam Hartman was a bust. No, he wasn't. And I'll ask a question. Well, I won't ask a question. I'm just going to tell you. If you think Notre Dame would have been 10-3 last year, if Sam Hartman doesn't come, I think you're sadly mistaken. He certainly helped the football team this past season by coming in. You've been helped. Chris Smith 2 years ago was a great portal pickup for Notre Dame a couple years ago. You look at this year, Max, you look at Chris Mitchell, Bo Collins, Jaden Harrison, you got Rod Hurd. Getting Thomas Harper last year was huge. Getting Javonte Jean-Baptiste last year was huge. Getting R.J. Oben in this year's cycle is huge. So Notre Dame has been able to use it to plug holes in a way that I honestly did not think they were going to be able to do. I honestly did not think Notre Dame was going to be able to plug the holes at defensive end, wide receiver, that nickelback that they have. They got Jordan Clark in this year's cycle. That's been a little bit surprising, getting quality football players, getting the top quarterback target on the market to come in, getting 2 very good receivers that were on the market that were heavily recruited in Chris Mitchell and Bo Collins to come here. Those are all things that you look at and say, boy, this moves the needle. And then to do that while not losing as many players as maybe we expected, but then also creating essentially a feeder program from the Ivy Leagues to Notre Dame as part of your walk-on program is really a brilliant strategy by Notre Dame. And kudos to Chad Bowden, kudos to Marcus Freeman for doing this because, you got Chris Smith a couple years ago. John Sott came and was a walk-on. Chris Smith, I believe, was on scholarship. But John Sott comes in as a walk-on, has a great year as your punter. You've had Grant Ristoff was a great great depth guy, quality team guy. Cole Aubrey helped in that regard last year. And then you've got the kids coming in this year. So you talk about building a roster and the right way to build a roster. And instead of complaining about, oh, we can't do this and we can't do this and this hurts us and that hurts us, in 11 years, Brian Kelly never found the right answer to building up your roster to get to that number you need to get to. It would be bringing in these walk-ons who can afford to come to Notre Dame that just honestly aren't helping you, because it's like the kid's 5'9" and he runs a 4'9". He's not helping my receivers get better. There's some guys that do. I think Marty Hour is the guy that helps you get better. There's some guys that are like that help you get better. But a lot of them, that guy's not helping you get better. So what did Marcus Freeman and Chad Bowden and the staff say? Well, we're not going to complain about it. We've got to find other pipelines. We can't bring in a lot of high school kids as walk-ons. But the ones we bring in, they're going to be impact players. They're going to be good football players. And Notre Dame has done that. They got some pretty quality high school walk-ons coming in next year, including Corny Southall's kid, Xavier Southall. So they're doing their job there, but now they're hitting the portal and saying, hey, look, you come here. Yes, you're a walk-on. No, we cannot give you academic money, but clearly you're at an Ivy League. So you're in a situation where either academic money or financial aid money or your family can afford to send you there. Well, then you can afford to go to Notre Dame and come and help them help this football team and have a role. And so you're seeing that. And I think it's a great strategy, and it's going to allow Notre Dame to develop their roster, because if you're Notre Dame, it may put you in a pickle, this 85 scholarship thing, but the success you're having, getting those portal kids from outside the program that are the Ivy League kids, you're getting like Jake Trafelsky coming from Central Michigan, which was a really good pickup for Notre Dame because of the role you're going to ask him to play. Those things are going to help your football team, and then keeping the guys on the team now. So we say, well, maybe Brennan Vernon transfers, or maybe Tyson Ford transfers, or maybe Aiden Gobyra transfers. Well, I'm glad none of them transferred, especially Tyson and Brennan, because now next year, if they're bought in, they may still be on the scout team. But instead of going against a couple walk-ons on the scout team, you're going against Brennan Vernon and Tyson Ford, which is then in turn going to make them better. I think those things are big for your program, and that's going to help you get better. I've said this before on the show. The best teams that I coached on, the teams that won championships, whether it's conference championships, which I was a part of, I think I was part of four conference championships in 7 years, won a national championship 1 year. All those teams that the best teams we had, there were a lot of weeks where when we get to Saturday, we were not playing against teams that had as much talent as we had on our scout team like that week. Like, because we had some young, really talented kid who just wasn't ready yet, giving us a great look down there. And that's where you need to get to. I mean, we've heard these stories from the USC era when Pete Carroll was there, where by the time they got to Saturday, I was like, that's a piece of cake. There's no problem because of the way the week of practice went. That hasn't always been true for Notre Dame. It's rarely been true for Notre Dame. And the way that they're trying to hold on to their roster and then build with great high school depth of recruiting. We talked about that yesterday, but then going out there and having success in the portal is allowing Notre Dame to put together a much, much more impactful football team, and a team that has the kind of depth that you need to go out there and be successful and win championships. And that's a huge, huge plus for Notre Dame to be able to do that. So I have to be honest with you. I'm surprised the portal has been as impactful for Notre Dame as it has, but it's a good thing that it's happened for Notre Dame. It's certainly a positive that it's happened for Notre Dame, because it's going to help them be a deeper football team, a more effective football team, and a football team that has a chance to go out there and have the numbers and the talent that they need to go make a deep run. Because nowadays you've got to do it for 16 weeks. It can't just be 12. It can't just be 13. You've got to do it for 16 weeks. And to do that, you need depth. And it's not just the depth on Saturday. So I really like what I've seen from the portal movement, and in some cases lack thereof. and it's going to create for some very fascinating fall battles. And I cannot wait to see those. I'm very much looking forward to seeing those. And we're going to dive into that stuff, obviously, as we get deeper into the offseason. So that's going to do it for this portion of the show. Got buy, sell, or hold next. I'm excited about the buy, sell, or hold today. We got some really good propositions today from you guys that I'm looking forward to. But before we get there, hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell. Y'all know what to do. Share this podcast, give us a 5-star review, and of course, sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right. Final portion of today's show is our Wednesday buy, sell, or hold. This is the new segment that we're going to do at the end of the show every Wednesday. There may be some times during the summer, especially when Vince and I are doing shows together, which will start in June, about the middle of June, when we'll be doing that we'll do maybe like some whole shows on Wednesday that are buy, sell, or holds. But until then, it is more so going to be a segment at the end. So I don't take all the suggestions because otherwise it'd be a 2-hour segment, and we're not going to do that. But we're going to bring out some of it's not the best because it's some of them are really good, but I feel like we've either addressed it lately. I was going to cover it in the show today. So there's a lot of reasons why some of the suggestions from the board were not taken, but I did take a lot of them, and I'm looking forward to talking about them. The super chat option is there for you if you want to get one of your buy, sell, or hold questions in there. We do have a couple super chats that I'll get to at the end of the show. I do not think, they were not buy, sell, or holds, but I will get to those at the end of the show. Actually, I'll pull up one of them now from Anthony Solomon. He said, thank you for the show today. Thanks for the show today. You're welcome, Anthony, and I appreciate that. I appreciate your super chat very, very much, man. I hope you're enjoying the show today. So just a reminder, buy, sell, or hold is you can propose anything related to Notre Dame football, Notre Dame recruiting, or college football. And you give me the buy, sell, or hold option. Buy means I'm buying it. I'm all in. I think it's going to happen. Sell, I don't think that's going to be the case. Hold is, I'm not sure. For whatever reason, I'm not sure. Try my best not to do holds, but sometimes it just has to be done. And so we'll see from those. The questions are taken from the premium message board. If you are a premium member, every week we will put a thread up and we will take your submissions for this and we will answer those in the show. With that being said, let's get rocking and rolling on today's buy, sell, hold. We're going to start off with Domer Grizz. He says Lauren Landau and the other improvements to the strength and conditioning program that came with him will have a bigger impact on the team's performance in 2024 than Body by Bayless had in 2017. I am going to sell that. And I'm not selling that because I don't think Lauren Landau is going to do a good job. Everything I've heard so far has been great. The feedback that I've heard from players, parents, and coaches and everybody has just been really, really good for what we've seen so far. The reason that I'm selling is because it's about relative to what you were walking into. Yes, last year was a bit of a step back in the strength program because Matt Bayless left right before the season. But Lauren Landau still walks into a much better situation than what Matt Bayless walked into in 2017. Matt Bayless had to completely turn around a strength program that was incredibly, incredibly flawed. It was a broken strength program. I've shared some of the horror stories that I've had from people that were part of the team at the time about how sometimes they couldn't get into the gym, so they had to go work out either somewhere else on campus or they'd have to get a local gym membership. You had a strength coach who just wasn't able to get the job done. So you had a subpar strength conditioning program. And Matt Bayless made it one of the best. Now, they took a step back when he left for a year, but it was still much better than that. So will he have a positive impact? I believe so. From everything I've heard, he will. But it's kind of like, Nick Saban. I fully expect Kalen DeBoer to win more in year one at Bama than Nick Saban won in year one at Bama when he got here. Well, does that mean Kalen DeBoer is better than Nick Saban or had a bigger impact? No. It means Nick Saban walked into a much worse situation. So I think Lauren Landau's job is take it to that final step, and where Matt Bayless walked in and said, you got to completely turn this thing around. And he did, and did a great job of it. And so that's why I'm going to sell that one. I don't see that being the case. Let's get to the next one. Coach Bent, 574, had a couple of them. He says, Dylan McCullough will be the next coach to leave for a true promotion. OC, DC, strength, special teams coordinator, or head coach. I am going to sell that one. And the reason I'm going to sell that one is because I think it's possible, but I think the way that this offseason has gone, I have a feeling that Al Washington will actually be the next coach to get that kind of job. And the reason I say that is it's not because I think Al Washington would do a better job than Dylan McCullough, or he's more prepared. It's just kind of the trend that we've seen in college football. There's a lot more ADs that are looking for the young guy. They're looking for that up-and-comer. They're looking for the next Marcus Freeman or Dan Lanning or whatever the case may be. We're seeing that in the NFL with coordinator positions where they want that young guy. Well, Dylan McCullough's 50 years old, and Al Washington is still in his 30s. And we've even seen Al Washington get a little bit more traction for that in the past. Plus, the other thing that Al Washington has going for him is Al Washington is a D-line coach, which gets a little bit more respect, fairly or unfairly, than what Dylan McCullough will get because he's a running backs coach. I think running back coaches, I've said this before, get viewed unfairly and differently because of just the nature of the position that they coach. I hope that I'm wrong about this because I think Dylan McCullough is absolutely deserving of that type of role. I think he's been an excellent position coach for a long time. Everything I've heard about him is that he's someone who understands the value of developing young men, not just football players. That means a lot to me. And so I think those things matter. And he's, of course, a very good recruiter. So I think I think the answer should be buy, but I don't think it will be. Because I think that you'll see a younger guy get that opportunity. An Al Washington, perhaps even a Mike Mickens type of guy that'll get an opportunity like that. Maybe Mike Brown, who's a younger guy. Brown, I'd say, is a little less likely. He's got to prove himself a little bit more than the other two, but that's kind of that's why I feel like the answer is a sell. Next one from Coach Bent. It says Notre Dame's leaders next year in sacks, tackles, and interceptions will all be by a first-year starter at Notre Dame. Doesn't have to be the same player. So sacks, okay, that's a good question. Sacks, so you're thinking it'll be like an RJ Oben, basically. I'm going to sell that one. First-year starter, no, because it could be a linebacker. So it's not going to be Howard Cross, not going to be Riley Mills, not going to be Jordan Patel-Ho. It would either be RJ Oben or Boubacar Traore. I am going to sell that one. I think that the leader in sacks will be somebody that's returning starter. It'll either be Jordan Patel-Ho, it'll either be Riley Mills, Howard Cross, or even potentially even a Jack Kaiser. So I'm going to sell that on sacks. I'm going to take them one at a time. Tackles, that one I'll buy because I think their leader in tackles is going to be the Mike linebacker. It could potentially be Jack Kaiser at will, but I think it's going to be the Mike linebacker, and that's obviously I think it's going to be a new starter, which will either be Drake Bowen or Kingston Villamasa, Kahano Kia, somebody like that. I think it's going to be Drake, but and everything that I've heard is going to be Drake. But whoever starts at Mike linebacker is going to be a new starter, and that person I think is going to lead the team in tackles. And the interception, so that one I'm gonna buy because I don't think you're going to see Xavier Watts or Benjamin Morrison get thrown at enough for them to lead the team in sacks. So I'm actually going to buy that one. I think there's a lot of merit to that one being true. So I'm going to buy that one. That you'll have a new leader there. So that's a good submission, Coach. Next one is from Irish in Clemson's backyard. Buy, sell, or hold. Notre Dame winning 11 games and a playoff game will be more about the strength of the defense than it is about the improvements of the offense this year. I'm going to sell that. I'm going to sell that because I don't think they can go 11-1 and make a run in the playoff without the offense really carrying the day. I think we saw that last year. I mean, how much better can the defense really get than it was last year? it can get better, but is it going to be better enough for them to win 2 of the 3 games they lost and then to get into the postseason and winning a playoff game? I don't know that it can be. And so to me, the defense might be the best unit. And if you're talking about that, then sure. But I think it's going to be the season hinges on the ability of the offense to improve, and especially improve in the big moments. So I'm going to sell that one. I like where your head's at. I think that's an interesting one. That's why I wanted to answer it. But I am going to sell it because I still think it's going to be about the offense and how good the offense can be. Indy Hoosier had a couple of them. First one is buy, sell, or hold. Notre Dame will finish the 2025 recruiting class in the top 5 for most services. I'm going to sell that because of what we're already seeing. Now, if you were to ask me that Notre Dame will finish in the top 5 in recruiting classes, in my opinion, I'd say that's possible, certainly possible. I might buy that one. But we're already seeing Dallas Golden drop in the rankings. This happened like On3, for example, and did an update after the 2023 season, looked at film of Dallas Golden and decided he's the number 57 player in the country. And then in March, for no reason that I can think of whatsoever, dropped him into the 120s. Okay, why? You know, I've never really felt that On3 has had an anti-Notre Dame agenda, but it's just a silly rankings drop. There are players in this class that I think are criminally underrated, and Dallas Golden would be one. If they added Jadon Blair, On3 has him ranked high. The others have him ranked way too low. Rivals doesn't even have him in their top 250. I don't know how that is, but that's just the reality of it. So I just don't see any of the Notre Dame players getting the kind of respect they should. And now that they've all committed to Notre Dame with like 247 Sports and with some others, ESPN, I don't know that they're going to get the push that they should get based on their production. I've said this before, and I've used this argument with people when I'm having the stars matter thing. And I said, macro level, sure, micro level, no. And one of the reasons I say that they don't matter is because I think the way in which some people get the rankings is arbitrary or done in a way that doesn't truly reflect an evaluation. And so I've pointed out how Alabama will sign a kid who's ranked 150th, and then, or they'll get a commitment, and then in the very next ranking, all of a sudden that kid's 40th. Well, why? Because he's going to Bama. Because people will give their guys the benefit of the doubt. And so then that guy goes to college, he pans out because the staff identified him at Alabama, becomes a top player, and say, see, stars matter. Well, you didn't rank him that high because of his evaluation. You did that because he went to Bama, right? You did that because he went to Ohio State. You did that because he went to Georgia. They didn't do that with Clemson back in the early 2010s. And so what it meant is, well, how's Clemson outperforming their recruiting rankings? Well, they're not really outrecruiting their recruiting success. You didn't give them the same benefit of the doubt when they landed a kid. If Isaiah Simmons would have gone to Alabama instead of Clemson, I am quite confident in saying that he would have received a much bigger jump in the rankings than what he got when he signed with Clemson. I'm very confident in that because he was an unranked 4-star by 247, an unranked 4-star by ESPN, and an unranked 3-star by Rivals. I'd be willing to bet you $100 that if he would have committed to Bama instead of Clemson or Georgia instead of Clemson, that his ranking would have gone up higher. I've said this about Benjamin Morrison. Benjamin Morrison was a 3-star when he committed to Notre Dame. They beat Alabama and Washington for him, and he never got into anyone's top 300. If you go back and look at the rankings for Benjamin Morrison, I kept telling y'all until I was blue in the face, until I couldn't say it anymore, to the point you guys got sick of me saying it. I said, I don't care what anybody says. Benjamin Morrison's a top 100 player with 5-star upside. I don't care what anybody says. On3 had him as a 3-star. 247, ESPN, and Rivals all had him as a 4-star, but none of them had him ranked in their top 300, 247, or 250. He was ranked, the highest he was ranked was 30th as the number 30 corner in the country by Rivals. So did Benjamin Morrison, was his skill set properly reflected in the rankings? No. Why? Because he picked Notre Dame and he's from Arizona. If he was from Florida and he picked Bama, I promise you this. Again, I can't really prove it, but I believe it with every ounce of my being. If Benjamin Morrison would have picked Alabama over Notre Dame, he absolutely would have jumped in the top 250 of most of those rankings. I'd willing to bet you a lot of money on that one because that's just how the rankings work. I've proven it year after year after year after year. And I'm not the only person that proves this. So you're just not going to see, there's no motivation now to move Dallas Golden up. There's no motivation to move other players up. And when the recruiting services realize that Deuce Knight's not going to take other visits and the Deuce Knight is locked into Notre Dame, you're going to see some of them drop Deuce Knight as well. I'll bet you that happens as well. Not all of them, but some of them will, because there's nothing to sell. There's no clicks to generate anymore once they realize Deuce isn't going anywhere. And so that's something that certainly hurts Notre Dame. And it doesn't happen with every single kid, but it happens with a lot. And so that's why I don't think they'll ever get to that point, even though we may decide at the end, hey, I think that's a top 5 class. And, I'm looking at Notre Dame and their preseason top 5 or 6 team in the country, yet in the last 5 years, they haven't had a single recruiting class ranked in the top 5 or 6, according to the analysts. So, what gives? And so that's kind of why I say I'm selling on that one. Next one from Indy Hoosier, buy, sell, or hold. Notre Dame will land at least 6 of the following recruits. He lists Derek Meadows, Javon Boggs, Tanook Hines, Noah McHale, Man Ferriimo, Nathaniel Usu-Boateng, Gavin Nix, Mark Zachary, Jadon Blair, and Tristan Haynes. So I think I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to say they land. I'm going to sell that because looking at that list, I see 5. I'm comfortable going with 5 there. I don't know that I'm comfortable getting to 6 just yet because I think at best they'll get 2 of the 3 receivers. I think they'll get 1 of the 3 linebackers. I think they'll get 2 of those 3 DBs. So I'm going to go sell. I think they're going to get 5 of those guys. Would be my prediction for that one. Got 3 of them from my guy Hayden 32. First one is buy, sell, or hold. Jaden Thomas's inability to stay healthy will cause him to be left out of the receiver rotation. I will buy that from the standpoint of if he gets banged up again, he will get passed up. If you were to ask me to predict that will happen, I don't know that I'd be comfortable doing that. If he's healthy, he'll play for them and he'll help them. There's no doubt. When Jaden Thomas is healthy, Jaden Thomas helps the Notre Dame football team. But Jaden Thomas can't stay healthy. And then unlike past years, there's players that are capable of, when he's out, playing at a level where he doesn't get that job back. So I'm gonna buy that one. Jaden Greathouse will become a nationally recognized name this season. I'm absolutely buying that one. I am all on the Jaden Greathouse bandwagon. I'm gonna have to formally petition Salty for membership on that because he's clearly the president of that bandwagon of that club. So I'm gonna have to ask for special permission to be on there. So I'm gonna buy number 2, and then number 3. Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price will have a similar looking highlights as Josh Adams did in the 2017 season. I'm absolutely buying that as well. Yeah, I think the way that Mike Denbrock runs the offense, with the downhill running he uses, with the quarterback option as a runner that so much impacted the 2017 season, and then the ability to hurt teams on the perimeter with a big physical line, yes, I think we're going to see that. I think we're going to see some big-time home runs this year from the running backs, run and pass game. So, yep, I'm absolutely buying that. So, I'm 3 for 3, man, with yours on those. I'm 3 for 3 with where you are. So, yeah, I dig that one. So I'm going to buy all 3 of those. Give me 1 second. All right, let's get to the next one here from Garen Knutson. Buy, sell, or hold. Notre Dame wins the Joe Moore Award following the 2025 season. I'm going to buy that, Garen, because I'm looking at this football team and I'm projecting to 2025, and I think Notre Dame returns at least 4 starters, potentially all 5. If somebody beats out Tosh Baker in 2025 or 24, then you could return all 5 starters. And I think junior year version of Charles Jagasaw, and then senior year version of Ashton Craig and Billy Schrouth, plus hopefully Rocco emerges there with whoever's at right tackle. Man, Yeah, I'm buying that. And then you're gonna bring back a lot. You're gonna have Jeremiah Love's gonna be back, Jadarian Price is gonna be back. You're gonna have some talented receivers. That's gonna have a chance to be pretty good. That's gonna be pretty good. So I'm buying that. Christopher Crosby, buy, sell, or hold. As soon as next season, we will be able to say that this offense is the best the defense will see. As soon as next season. So I'm thinking through this. I am going to buy that, Christopher. So if I'm reading you correctly, you are saying that we will be talking about next season that the Notre Dame offense is the best offense that the Notre Dame defense will face, meaning fall camp and practice. I'm going to buy that one. And not because I'm predicting Notre Dame to have an LSU 2023 type of unit. It's because I don't think there's going to be any great offenses on there. I don't think Texas A&M in week 1 is going to be a great offense. I think Louisville is going to be a good offense. I don't know that it'll be better than Notre Dame's. Florida State could. They have a lot of questions to answer. They could. And I'm not as sold on USC's offense as others. I think USC is going to be a really good team this year. I don't think their offense is going to be better than Notre Dame's. It may score more points because of the nature of Lincoln Riley's offense, but I don't think it'll be better because I think Notre Dame's going to have a much better offensive line. They're going to have more skill talent, and they'll have a better quarterback. The difference in USC, USC is still going to be good on offense. Don't get it twisted. They're still going to be pretty good on offense. But I don't think they're going to be like this game-changing 45-point-per-game team because of their talent. If they're doing that, it's because of my next point, which is that Lincoln Riley finally figured out how to have a defense. I like the D'Anton Lynn hire. They went and got Doug Belk to coach the secondary. Eric Henderson was a really quality hire. He had a major upgrade on the defensive side of the ball. The reason I'm predicting USC to be a minimum 9-10 win team next year, minimum, is because I think they'll be pretty good on offense. 38 to 42 points a game. Again, it's the nature of the league. I think you'll see probably a little under 40 this year because they are playing in the Big Ten. Their skill talent's good, but not elite. I think the big thing is going to be they're playing in a league that won't be able to threaten them as much defensively as the league they came from. But B, I think they're going to be a lot better on defense. I think the D'Anton Lynn hire was very, very good. So I think USC is going to be a minimum 9-3 team because I think they're going to be a lot better on defense. That's what I think. And so that's where I'm at. And if they're not better on defense, then they're worse than 9-3. That's going to hurt their offense in a big way. So I don't think that they're going to be better than Notre Dame. So I think I'm going to buy that one. Good one, Christopher. I like that. Those are the kind of ones that make me think for a minute. I enjoy those. Hofer Domer, buy, sell, or hold. RJ Oben and Boubacar Traore will lead the team in sacks with 8 each. I'm going to sell that. I could see the first part. I could see RJ and Boubacar leading the team in sacks. But I think that number would be, if they tie, I think that number would be closer to 5 or 6 at this point in time, would be closer in line with where I think this team would be from a sack standpoint. Tatted up Irishman, buy, sell, or hold. Notre Dame will get a player on the cover of college football game within the next 4 years. I'm definitely buying that. Because I mean, they may have it this year because if I read this correctly, they're going to have multiple different cover players. So kind of like how like Athlon Sports has a different cover for different regions. If I heard this correctly, they're going to have like multiple different cover options for people to buy. And so when you look at Notre Dame and who they're going to have, yeah, I see that. I think that they'll have a shot to do that. Absolutely. So I'm going to buy that. I'm going to definitely buy that. Joe Allen, 72, buy, sell, or hold. Jordan Faison becomes the main slot receiver once he returns to full football-only status. I'm selling that. I love Jordan Faison. Great kid. He's going to help this football team this year. There's no doubt about it. He wasn't their best slot receiver last year, and he won't be their best slot receiver this year. That's going to be Jaden Greathouse. So barring Jaden Greathouse moving somewhere else, I don't see Jordan Faison being a starter. That does not mean he won't help. That does not mean he won't be productive. That does not mean that he won't be able to go out there and be a key part of this team and in some games be that guy that kind of leads you. But I don't see him being a guy that's going to be your primary slot receiver once he returns. And I'll say this, Joe, I think that's going to make him even more dangerous because you can't just game plan for him. He's a smaller guy, not a burner. So to me, it's a situation where I look at it and I say, man, if he's kind of that rotational guy and they kind of throw his unique skill set out there and you're kind of not prepared for it, I think you're going to see Jordan make some big plays next year as part of that rotation, but I don't think he'll be the guy. With your chest, buy, sell, or hold, Notre Dame will be able to transition away from having field boundary corners and to NFL-style left-right corners in 2024. I'm going to buy this because you said we'll be able to, not that they will do that. I don't think they will do that primarily because I don't think that's Al Golden's defense, but I think they'll be able to because if you have Benjamin Morrison and Christian Gray, you're able to play left-right or to travel. There's no doubt. So will they be able to? Yes. Will they do it? No. So good question. All right, let's get to some more here. Buy, sell, or hold from Real Irish 1988. Coach, do you see a scenario where Notre Dame can have a duplicate offense that North Carolina had in 2020, where they had 2 stud receivers and the 2,000-yard backs? Is this offense capable of being that explosive? No, I don't, for a couple of reasons. Number one is that was a different type of offense. That was an air raid offense designed to generate a lot of yards, a lot of plays, and a lot of points. I don't think Notre Dame will ever try to be that kind of offense, in my opinion. They will be explosive. They will be good. I could see a scenario in which they have 2,000-yard backs some year and a 1,000-yard receiver. Do I think I could see it, but I just don't know that we'll see it. The schedule is tougher. I think more likely is a 1,200-yard back or a 1,000-yard back, an 800-yard back, a quarterback with 500 yards, a bunch of receivers with more than 700 yards, and still be every bit as explosive as that North Carolina team was from a per-snap basis. So that's kind of why I look at that. I just there's a lot of in that offense with Phil Longo. There's a lot of empty yards in that offense that you'll have these games where you have these crazy numbers, but then you're just not really great all the time. And that's what we saw from that North Carolina team. And just the way that they run the offense, you're going to get a lot of plays, you're going to get a lot of yards. And I just don't see Notre Dame having that kind of team. What was ironic about that is that also happened during a shortened season. They only played 12 games that year because of COVID. But the other thing to look at is Sam Howell rushed for 146 yards that year as the quarterback, and the number 4 guy only had 99 yards. So those carries, the rushing numbers were dominated by 2 guys. With the Notre Dame quarterback and the depth they have at running back, I don't know that 2 guys will dominate quite that way. And so I'm gonna sell that one. It's a good question. Uncle LA. This was one that I was interested in answering when I was typing this. Uncle LA. Buy, sell, or hold. Kalen DeBoer is the beginning of a downward slump for Alabama football, but not from failing, but from winning a natty within the first 3 years of being there and leaving for the NFL. Alabama will not be as lucky to have a DeBoer-type coach waiting in the wind and will inevitably make a poor hire leading to a football drought. So what was interesting about this one is I was answering it as I'm reading through it. I'm answering it. I'm like, oh, that's not where he's going with it. Oh, that's not where he's going with it. So my first thought was Kalen DeBoer is the beginning of a downward slump for Alabama football. My first thought was sell because that slump already began. Alabama hasn't won a title since 2020. They have been slowly getting worse and worse and worse. Still very good. Don't get me wrong. But for them, they've not been as dominant the last 3 years as they were. So they've already been kind of on a downward trajectory, but not from failing. This is where he kind of threw me for a curveball. Not from failing, but from winning a natty within the first 3 years of being there and leaving for the NFL. I'm selling that because I do think Kalen DeBoer will win a lot at Bama. I could see him going to the NFL, no doubt about it. Definitely don't, but I don't think he's going to win a title. I think I don't see that. So I'm with you to a degree, but I'm selling it. And then I'm definitely selling or buying that their next hire won't be as good. I'm gonna buy that one. So I took it a couple different ways because it was a very intricate and very, very thoughtful buy, sell, or hold. I very much appreciate you doing that. Irish and Talks, there are buy, sell, or hold. There are multiple first-round draft picks on the current Notre Dame offense. If you're talking about guys on the Notre Dame offense will eventually be first-round picks at some point in time in their career. I'm definitely buying that. Will it be 2025? I'm selling that because I don't know. I don't think they had any in 2025. I could see Charles Jagusah being a first-round pick. I could see Kirby Lambert being a first-round pick. I could see Billy Schrauth being a first-round pick. I could see Jaden Greathouse maybe being a first-round pick. I could see Cam Williams being a first-round pick. I could see CJ Carr being a first-round pick. So there's a lot of potential first-round picks there that at some point in time in their careers will be first-round picks. Not even half of the guys that I think could be first-round picks have to go in the first round for Notre Dame to have that number. So, because multiples too. I mean, I would say the answer to that is by if you just said first-round offensive lineman on the 2024 on the Notre Dame offense. So I'm definitely buying that one. And Riley Leonard's another one. Yes. I mean, I don't know that Riley Leonard's going to jump into the first round. I need to see it. I think he's more of a day two guy from where I saw him. I think he's very talented. Love Riley Leonard. Think he can win a title, but I've only ever seen day two type of talent. He'd have to show me something this year to be day one. I don't see Chris Mitchell as being a first round pick. I'd love to be wrong about both of those. And I think they can be part of a championship football team. I mean, Stetson Bennett helped them win 2 titles and he wasn't taken in the first round. But so I'm buying that one for sure. At some point, more than two or more guys will be first round picks from this year's team. J.P. Higgins, 1975, when Notre Dame plays at Texas A&M on August 31st, A&M scores less than 15 points. I'm gonna sell that because I'm thinking more along the lines of like 17 to 20, even if it's a late score. So yes, I'm gonna go there. Andrew Gilmore, I don't see Mitchell Evans as a first round pick. I don't think he's the dynamic athlete that you need to be a first round pick. I think he's a day 2 pick, sure. But unless he surprises me at the combine, his combination of not being an elite athlete and the injury history is he's not. If Michael Mayer's not a first round pick, I have a hard time seeing Mitchell Evans as a first round pick. I think he could be the very, very good. But unless you're a Brock Bowers, Kyle Pitts type, we just haven't seen those kind of tight ends go in the first round as much lately. Onward to victory. Notre Dame would win just as many games this season by retaining Joe Alt instead of acquiring Riley Leonard. I am selling that. And Joe Alt is a dominant football player, one of the best players in college football last year. But the reality is a dynamic dual threat quarterback can have a much bigger impact on your football team than a guy that plays left tackle. The reality is Riley Leonard in 2022, his only full year as a starter, led Notre Dame to led Duke to 9 wins. The same number of wins that Joe Alt was a part of last year at Notre Dame in the regular season. 9. And Riley Leonard did that with Duke's talent. Riley Leonard was 4-1 last year with a win over Clemson and they were 30 seconds away from beating Notre Dame and being 5-0 with Riley Leonard at quarterback. Think about that, guys. 5-0. They were about to be 5-0. Notre Dame comes back and wins that game. He gets hurt. They drop to 4-1. He comes back against Florida State. They have a lead on the road at Florida State. He gets hurt, comes out. Florida State comes back and wins. This kid is a winner, and a dynamic dual threat quarterback can impact the game from a win-loss standpoint more than just the very best left tackle in all of college football. So I'm going to sell that one. Coleman Smith, buy, sell, or hold. Jaden Harrison and Aeneas Williams will both have a kick return for a touchdown this season. I'm going to buy that with an asterisk that I believe 2 guys will have kick returns for scores. It may be Jadarian Price and Jaden Harrison. It may be Jadarian and Aeneas Williams. I think 2 guys will have a kick return for touchdown this year. And it could very well be Jaden Harrison and Aeneas Williams. So I'm okay with that. But I'm going to buy that. Yeah, I'm going to buy that. All right, we've got Lou Holtz's grandson, Riley Mills, has a breakout in the buy, sell, or hold. Riley Mills has a breakout in the sense of becoming one of, if not the most dominant interior lineman in college. You know what? I'm in a good mood today. I'm going to buy that. I think it's certainly possible. I'm not betting my mortgage on it because Riley's got to show it, but I think he's got the talent to do that. There's no doubt. He has the talent to be that guy. He's just got to show it. But yeah, I think he could. Willie S., buy, sell, or hold. Missing the spring practice was the best thing for Riley Leonard's future career as a passer. Willie, I think you're spot on. I think Riley Leonard getting legit mental reps, not coach speak mental reps, but real mental reps, and having to focus, zeroing on his technique as a thrower without being able to run is going to help him out as a passer quite a bit this fall. I truly believe that, so I am buying that one. I like where your head's at. Salty Virginia Peanuts, the great one, a.k.a. Jaden Greathouse, will be one of the final 10 players for the Heisman Trophy this season, but will not be invited to New York, and they'll be very, very sorry. You're going to be mad at me, Salty, but I'm selling that one. I don't think he'll have enough production at wide receiver to be a Heisman finalist this year. Now, if you're saying at some point in time in his career, maybe, but I think it's more likely that the quarterback who throws him the ball to get all those yards will be the guy that's more so a top 10 finalist. So I'm going to sell that one, but I would love to be wrong about it. Buy, sell, or hold from PA Irish Guy 23. It is the offense that carries the team this season, not the defense. So this is kind of the opposite of what the earlier question was. I don't think the offense will carry this team the way that the defense is like kind of coming along. Just like I don't think the defense is going to be the reason that this team takes a big step. This team is going to take a big step because the defense is going to remain very good and the offense is finally going to match it, which means they become a great team. And it's not one carrying the other. There's going to be weeks where the offense has to carry the defense and weeks where the defense has to carry the offense. That's what makes great teams. So I don't think either one is going to, quote unquote, carry the team the way that it has in the past, if this team is as good as we expect. So I'm going to sell that one. Balpeen Shalala, the O-line, quote unquote, figures it out and allows no more than 10 sacks in the final half of the regular season. I'm going to buy that. I think that's a spot-on evaluation of the offense, no doubt. Buy, sell, or hold, Old Jarhead. By not putting names on the jerseys hurts the NIL opportunities, especially for young incoming talent. I'm going to sell that hard. Who was the most marketable player in college football last year? Like, who's the guy that we saw, not so much just NIL money, but who's the guy that you looked at and was like, this guy is kind of the face of college football going into the season. You know what I mean? Who would you say that was? I mean, I would argue that it was Caleb Williams. I mean, I would argue that he was that guy. I mean, you're seeing him on national stuff. You're seeing him on all these type of different things. And, I think he's a guy that certainly, if you look at just most NIL money, he was definitely top 5 in NIL money last year. And what's on the back of his jersey? Number 13. That's it. You look at when USC had Reggie Bush and all these other guys, like, you know what? Like, was there any issues marketing USC's players back in the mid 2000s? No, there wasn't. They didn't have jerseys on. They didn't have names on the back of their jerseys. USC doesn't have names on the back of their jerseys. So no, I don't think names on the back of their jerseys hurts their NIL opportunities at all. That's about how good of a player are you, how marketable are you, and what kind of social media presence do you have. I don't think it has anything to do with the names on the back of the jerseys. If Notre Dame goes out there and wins a championship this year, Notre Dame's players will not have increased their NIL opportunities because they put names on the back of their jerseys. They will sell out like crazy. Sam Hartman made bunches of money last year at Notre Dame. Didn't have a name on the back of his jersey. I don't think that matters at all. I've heard people make that argument before. It's just, I don't buy it. There's no evidence of it, especially since what you see at USC from a marketing standpoint. I mean, USC is not having any problem handing out NIL dough to players because it's LA. It's because USC. It's they're talented guys. It's just not an issue. G. Perez, buy, sell, or hold. Notre Dame will have at least 4 different players, at least 500 yards of total offense. So that's rushing and receiving. G. Perez, I am buying that. Between Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, I think both go over 500 yards, and I think at least 2 receivers will go over 500 yards. And I could even see Riley Leonard rushing for more than 500 yards. So I would say that I would set the over-under at 5.5 is what I'd set the over-under at for guys that are going to have at least 500 yards. And then I would take the over on that. So, yes, I am buying that one, my man. Thank you for that submission. And I think that's it. So I believe that is the last one. Let me just pull this down real quick and make sure that's the last one. So that is our buy, sell, or hold for this week. So I wanted to thank you all for being part of today's show. I enjoyed that very much. We'll be back tonight, IB Nation Sports Talk. Tomorrow, I'll be back with another show at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You're going to be wanting to be around for that. Hit that like button, folks. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Share this podcast. Sign up for the message board at boardsirishbreakdown.com. It supports Irish Breakdown. It helps us grow our channel. It helps us grow our staff. It helps us take care of my people. And you're also going to get a chance to be part of a great community. I promise you, even if you're not a message board person, you'll talk to people. There's super chats. My bad, everybody. Super chats. Andrew Gilmore with a super chat. Thank you, Andrew. See, I jumped the gun. I completely forgot about super chats, man. That's on my fault. Andrew Gilmore, super chat. Who do you like in the NBA playoffs? Does it cheapen LeBron's legacy that he's essentially forcing a team to draft his son? MJ never did that. Now, MJ never had players that would even be remotely close enough to be drafted. I would argue that LeBron doesn't either. So no, I don't think that hurts his legacy at all. I think it's right on par with LeBron. That's who LeBron's been his whole career. I don't think that hurts his legacy at all. Who do I like in the NBA playoffs? Honestly, Andrew, I haven't paid enough attention to really have a team. I don't care. I couldn't even tell you. I saw that the Lakers got beat by the Nuggets 4-1 because that's all anybody ever talks about is the Lakers. But honestly, I just haven't paid attention at all to the playoffs so far. I'll start paying more closer attention when we get to the finals of the two conference finals. I'll start paying attention, then I'll watch the finals. But I don't really care right now. I don't. I'm just glad the Lakers are out because I grew up a Celtics fan, so I'm always rooting for the Lakers to lose, and so they did. Andrew Gilmore with another one. Buy, sell, or hold a 12-team group of 5 playoff. If they're on board for it, I think that'd be great. I'd be on board for that, and then just let them have a winner. Yeah, I'd be all about that. I think that'd be great for the sport. I think it'd be great for those players, great for those teams. So yeah, if a TV company is willing to pay for that, then go for it. Absolutely. Iden Benami with a super chat. Alt's future the same if no one gets hurt. I don't understand the question, Iden. I don't know what you mean by Joe Alt's future is the same if no one gets hurt. I honestly, I'm trying to think about what you're saying, and maybe you could throw it in there, Iden. I'm not quite sure what you're talking about there. So Joe Walt's future is the same if no one gets hurt. Oh, are you talking about in 2021? I gotcha. Yeah, I think so. I think Joe Walt was so good, he eventually would have pushed Blake Fisher to the right side. Yeah, because even if Jeff Quinn wasn't willing to do it, then I would say Harry Hiestand definitely would have. When Harry Hiestand came in 2022, he'd have flipped Joe Walton and Blake Fisher, no doubt. Because I think what would have happened is Joe would have stepped into the lineup, but I think what you would have seen in 2021 if Blake didn't get hurt is you'd have seen either Blake or Joe move to right tackle, and then Josh Lugg would have moved inside the guard. I think that's what would have happened. And he'd have kicked him maybe over to left guard instead of Andrew Kostovic. And so I think that's what, or maybe kicked him inside and taken over for Kane Madden. One of those two things would happen. So yes, I think that that's what would have happened in 2021. But then going into 2022, when Coach Hiestand arrived, you'd have seen him flip them, and Joe Walt would have been the left tackle. So yes, Joe Walt's future would have been the same if no one got hurt. I do think so. He may not have started as soon as he did, but he'd still be a first-round draft pick and be the player he was. The talent eventually rises to the top, and for Joe Walt, it did. So now that makes more sense. Yeah, I was not getting it at first, so it makes way more sense. Because, yes, Blake Fisher got hurt, then Michael Carmody got hurt, then Tosh Baker got hurt, and then they kind of had to throw him in there, and he never looked back. So, yeah. So that's going to do it. That's officially going to do it. Great way to end it. So thank you guys for reminding me about the super chats. I'd have felt terrible if we'd have ended this and not had the super chat. So I'm glad we got to those. So have a great rest of your day, everybody. And we'll talk to you again here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.